Some archaeological discoveries rewrite history, and some are just designed to fool us. They're crafted with so much skill that they trick the world's leading experts and capture our imagination for decades. This is the story of the most audacious archaeological lie of the 20th century. A lie that started with a single piece of parchment and ended with a microscopic truth that only 21st century science could reveal. This is the story of the Vinland Map. In 1965, a single piece of parchment threatened to rewrite 500 years of history. It was called the Vinland Map, and it looked like proof that Vikings had not only discovered America, but had mapped it almost 50 years before Columbus ever set sail. It was hailed as the most important historical find of the century. But this priceless artifact held a dark secret, a microscopic lie that took the world's best scientists decades to uncover. The promise. Picture this. It's 1965. The world believes Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1492. Then, right before Columbus Day, Yale University holds a press conference that changes everything. They unveil a map, supposedly drawn around the year 1440. It's a mappa mundi, a medieval map of the known world, showing Europe, Africa, and Asia. But up in the top left corner, west of Greenland, there's an island that no one has ever seen on a map like this before. It's labeled Vinland Insula, the island of Vinland. For the first time, here was a map that seemed to confirm the Old Norse sagas, the Icelandic tales describing Leif Erikson's voyage to a new land, a land rich with wild grapes, nearly 500 years before Columbus. The map suggested that not only did Vikings get to North America, but that people in Europe knew about it. This wasn't just a stray ship blown off course, it was a known destination. The implications were just staggering. It challenged the entire story of American discovery and kicked off a huge debate over who really got there first. Yale University, which had acquired the map, staked its reputation on it, publishing a detailed book and presenting it as a genuine medieval treasure. The world was hooked. This simple drawing wasn't just a map, it was a rewriting of our own story. The discovery. The map's journey to the public was as mysterious as its contents. It first popped up in 1957, when a London book dealer offered it to the British Museum. The dealer was a middleman for an obscure European source named Enzo Ferrajoli, a man who, it later turned out, was a known thief of rare books. The museum's experts were intrigued, but the head of manuscripts had a bad feeling. He was bothered by the map's almost too perfect drawing of Vinland, and the fact the seller wouldn't say where he got it. They passed. Soon after, the map was sold for just $3,500 to an American dealer, Lawrence Witten, who knew it could be a bombshell. He brought it to his alma mater, Yale. For 8 years, Yale scholars studied the map in total secret. They found it bound between two authentic 15th century books, the Tartar Relation and the Speculum Historiale. And here was the real kicker. Wormholes on the map seemed to line up perfectly with wormholes in the other documents, suggesting they'd all been bound together for centuries. Convinced by the evidence, a wealthy Yale alumnus, Paul Mellon, bought the map for a fortune and donated it to the university. When Yale finally announced its existence in 1965, those wormholes and the 15th century parchment were presented as slam-dunk evidence. The map became a media sensation. But even as the world was celebrating, a handful of skeptical scholars started noticing details that just didn't add up. The first cracks in this historical masterpiece were starting to show. The first doubts. As soon as photos of the map were out, specialists in cartography and medieval documents started raising red flags. The first problem was Greenland. It was shown as a perfect island, drawn with shocking accuracy. The issue? No European had sailed all the way around Greenland in the Middle Ages. Drawing it as an island wasn't common on maps until centuries later. It looked way too modern. Then there was the writing. The Latin script on the map used phrases and letters that seemed wrong for the 1440s. But the most damning clue came from a historical deep dive. Researchers realized that the Vinland map's outline of Africa and Europe was eerily similar to a 1436 map by an Italian cartographer, Andrea Bianco. But it wasn't just similar, it copied specific mistakes from a printed reproduction of the Bianco map made in 1782. It looked like the forger hadn't copied a medieval map, but a picture of one from a much later book. Still, the scientific community was split. The parchment itself was real. Radiocarbon dating proved it came from the 15th century, and that one fact kept the debate raging for years. Believers argued that you can't fake medieval parchment. Skeptics shot back that a smart forger wouldn't have to. They could just find a blank page from an authentic medieval book and draw on that. And the Timbrasa Speculum Historiale it was bound with was the perfect source for a blank page. The battle lines were drawn, and the only way to settle it was to analyze the very molecules of the map itself. The scientific gauntlet. The first major scientific shot fired at the map came in the 1970s. A brilliant and meticulous microscopist named Walter McCrone got permission to take tiny samples of the map's ink. Now, medieval scribes used something called iron gall ink, a mix made from iron sulfate and crushed oak galls. It's rich in iron and sulfur. When McCrone put the Vinland Map's ink under his microscope, he found something that made no sense. He found almost no iron at all. Instead, he found tiny particles of a substance called anatase, a specific form of titanium dioxide. There was just one tiny problem. That form of anatase pigment wasn't commercially produced until the 1920s. For McCrone, the case was closed. The ink was modern, so the map was a fake. But his findings were fiercely contested. Map defenders argued his samples were too small to be conclusive, or that the anatase was just some random contamination. The debate raged on for decades, a frustrating stalemate between historical believers and chemical evidence. It wasn't until the 21st century that our technology got good enough to deliver a final, undeniable verdict. In 2018, a team of researchers at Yale decided to end this once and for all. Using state-of-the-art tools like X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, they scanned the entire map without ever touching it, mapping out its chemical makeup from edge to edge. This time, there'd be no arguments about small samples. They weren't just looking at a few spots, they were looking at every single line. The revelation, the anatomy of a lie. The results of Yale's new analysis were devastating. The scans confirmed what McCrone had found, but on a massive scale. Titanium wasn't just in a few spots, it was in the ink throughout the entire map. The lines drawing the famous Vinland Insula were basically painted with a 20th century compound. What's more, the analysis confirmed there was basically none of the iron and sulfur you would need for medieval ink. But the team found something even more cunning. They looked at the asterisk-Tartar relation, the authentic medieval text bound with the map, and found that parts of it had been altered with the exact same modern titanium ink. The final nail in the coffin, though, was on the back of the map. A faint note, probably from a medieval bookbinder, had been written over with the modern ink, likely to make it look like instructions for binding the map into the book. This wasn't an accident. It was deliberate, calculated deception. In September 2021, Yale University issued a definitive statement. Raymond Clemens, a curator at Yale's library, announced, "The Vinland Map is a fake. There is no reasonable doubt here. This new analysis should put the matter to rest." The decades of debate were over. Science had finally exposed the microscopic lie at the heart of the world's most famous map. The unanswered question and the real story. Now that the forgery is proven, only one big question is left. Who did it? The prime suspect has always been Enzo Ferrajoli, the book dealer with a shady past who first tried to sell it. But no definitive proof has ever surfaced. The creator remains a ghost, a talented, knowledgeable, and unbelievably bold forger who was never unmasked. Their motive was probably a mix of money and the fun of exploiting the national pride tied to who discovered America. But here's the beautiful irony in all this. While the Vinland Map is a lie, the history it was trying to represent is completely true. Right around the time the map chaos was starting in the early 1960s, a Norwegian explorer and his archaeologist wife, Helge and Anne Steen Ingstad, were chasing down clues in the Old Norse sagas. At a place called Lonso Meadows, on the northern tip of Newfoundland, Canada, they discovered the remains of a Viking settlement. They dug up timber-framed halls, a forge for working iron, and Norse artifacts that dated to around the year 1000 AD. This was it. Not a drawing, not a claim, but real, physical proof. The Lonso Meadows site, now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, confirms that Vikings reached North America almost 500 years before Columbus. They built a settlement, worked metal, and lived on the continent. So the Vinland Map is a fascinating paradox. It's a brilliant fake that, for decades, captivated the world with a true story. It's still at Yale, not as a medieval treasure, but as a different kind of artifact, one of the greatest forgeries of all time. It's a powerful reminder that history is a detective story, and sometimes science is the only tool that can separate fact from fiction. The Vikings really did make it to America first. They just didn't leave a map. They left something far better, proof. What do you think is the most fascinating part of this story? The skill of the forger, the science that exposed the lie, or the real Viking history that was true all along? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this historical detective story, be sure to like and subscribe for more archaeological mysteries.